Okay, so I'm just going to say this out loud because it's been sitting in my head for a while now and I need to get it out. The degree I was told to chase, the one that was supposed to be the answer to everything, might actually be one of the worst financial traps my generation ever walked into with a smile on our faces. And the scariest part isn't the debt. The scariest part is that we walked in knowing the price and still didn't understand the cost. Nobody sat us down and showed us the actual math. They just told us it was the path, and we believed them, because every adult we trusted believed it too. Let me take you back to the version of success I was handed growing up, and I mean handed, like it wasn't even a conversation. It was just assumed. Study hard, get the grades, pick something respectable, get into a university, finish in 4 years, and then the job comes, the salary comes, the apartment comes, the life comes. That was the sequence I memorized. That was the code I was told to follow. And the people who told me this, my parents, my teachers, the relatives at every family gathering, they weren't lying to me. They genuinely believed it because for their generation, it actually worked exactly like that. A degree back then was rare. It was a signal. It meant something specific about who you were. But here's the thing nobody updated us on. When something rare becomes common, it stops being a signal. It just becomes a floor. And the cost of that floor has gone completely, quietly insane. I think about the numbers sometimes, and it genuinely unsettles me. The average student loan debt for a bachelor's degree graduate in the United States right now sits around $37,000. But that's the average. Plenty of people I know, people our age, walked out of private universities carrying $80, $90, $100,000 or more on their backs. And they walked into a job market that, depending on what they studied, handed them $45,000 a year to start. I did that math once and just sat with it for a minute. You owe $100,000. You earn $45,000 a year before tax. After rent, food, transport, health insurance, all of it, there's almost nothing left over. And the interest on that loan is sitting there, growing quietly, like a slow leak in the ceiling that everyone agrees to ignore. Now I know the pushback. Some degrees do pay well. Engineering, medicine, law, certain finance tracks. And yes, I'm not pretending that's not true. But here's the question that actually bothers me more. What percentage of people who go to university actually end up working directly in the field they studied? Because the honest answer, and I've looked into this, is that somewhere between 40 and 50% of college graduates in the West are working in jobs that don't even require the degree they got. So I financed a credential that the job didn't even ask for. I paid for a ticket to a show that never really started. And this is where it gets uncomfortable for me personally, because I spent a long time not wanting to say this out loud. The university system, particularly in America and the UK, isn't primarily designed to get us jobs. It's designed to sustain itself. Tuition fees in America have grown at roughly 4 to 5 times the rate of inflation over the last 40 years. The administrative staff at major universities has ballooned by over 200% since the 70s, while actual teaching faculty numbers have barely moved. The buildings get fancier, the gyms get nicer, the branding gets sharper, and none of that helped me write code, run a business, understand my own taxes, or build anything with my mind that the market actually wanted to pay for. There's something I keep coming back to, and it's this. Education and learning are not the same thing. A certificate and a skill are not the same thing. I could graduate with a 4-year degree in marketing and still not know how to run a basic ad, write an email that converts, or read an analytics dashboard. Our generation got really good at passing tests designed by institutions to certify that we sat in rooms. We weren't necessarily getting good at doing things the actual economy wanted done. And I don't think I'm being unfair when I say that. I think it's just honest. What bothers me the most, though, the thing I genuinely couldn't shake for a long time, is the way the failure gets framed when it doesn't work out. Because the system never looks at itself. It looks at us. We didn't network enough. We didn't pick the right major. We didn't do enough internships. We didn't have enough passion. So now I'm sitting there, in debt, underemployed, and somehow convinced it's my fault. That psychological trap is one of the most effective ways a broken system protects itself from ever having to answer for anything. So here's where my thinking actually shifted, and this took me a while to arrive at, so I want to be careful about how I say it. The problem was never that education is useless. The problem is that the world quietly built an entirely new economy and forgot to send most of us the memo. While universities were still running the same syllabuses with the same structure they'd had for decades, the internet was doing something completely different. It was building an economy where what I can actually do matters infinitely more than where I studied or what paper I can show someone. And the gap between credentials and capability, that gap is now so wide that an entire generation of people is living inside it without realizing it's where all the opportunity actually is. I think about someone I know, not exceptionally talented in any way the school system would have rewarded, who left university in his second year. He spent about 18 months just learning video editing, mostly from free tutorials, did small jobs for free at first to build something to show people, then slowly started charging. Within 2.5 years, he was earning more than most of our friends who finished their degrees and went through the whole traditional process. He didn't have a certificate. He had a skill and proof he could use it. And I don't tell that story to make anyone feel inspired. I tell it because it genuinely made me rethink the assumptions I was operating on for most of my early life. The skills that are actually in demand right now, the ones the market is genuinely hungry for and willing to pay well for, are almost entirely learnable outside of a university. Video production, copywriting, web development, data analysis, digital marketing, design, automation, AI tools. None of these require a degree. All of them have legitimate learning paths available online, many of them free or cheap. And all of them can be built into freelance income, remote work, or real business within a time frame that makes a 4-year degree look like a very expensive detour that we took, because nobody told us there was another road. But I want to be real here because I've seen too much of this space get turned into a fantasy. Building skills outside the traditional path and finding clients and creating income from scratch is genuinely hard. It involves long stretches where nothing seems to be working and the doubt gets very loud. The traditional path felt safer to me not because the outcomes were better, but because the steps were scripted. There was a social story around it. University, degree, job applications, interview, job. Even when the outcome disappoints, the steps at least feel clear. The non-traditional path has no script. I was writing it myself as I went, and that discomfort is real, and I don't want to pretend otherwise. But here's the tension I had to sit with. The traditional path safety is increasingly an illusion. The script is clear, but the outcome has quietly deteriorated over the last 20 years for our generation. We can follow every step perfectly and still end up in debt with a job that underpays us in a housing market we can't afford, looking around at the life we were promised and wondering where it went. So the honest thing I had to admit to myself is this. The traditional path still feels safe because the story around it hasn't caught up to the reality of it. The non-traditional path still feels risky because the story around it hasn't caught up to how genuinely viable it's become. There's also something that changed my thinking completely, and I don't think our generation talks about it enough in this context: geographic arbitrage. If I'm earning in dollars or pounds or euros through remote work or freelancing, and I'm living somewhere with a significantly lower cost of living, the entire math of my financial life changes. A freelancer earning $3,000 a month is struggling in most major Western cities. That same $3,000 a month in Southeast Asia, in parts of Eastern Europe, in Latin America, or in many cities in India, which is where I'm from, is a genuinely comfortable income. I can save, I can invest, I can build something. That kind of leverage doesn't require a degree. It requires a skill that travels over the internet and the willingness to stop assuming the city I was born in is the only option I have. Now, let me be honest about the myths, because this is the part that frustrates me most when I see it online. Passive income is not passive. Every person I know who has something earning money without them actively working on it every single day spent years actively building it. The YouTube channel that earns ad revenue required hundreds of videos. The course that sells on autopilot required months of creation and years of building an audience before anyone was buying. The dividend portfolio required capital had to come from actual work first. The word passive describes the current state of the income, not the work that created it. And if anyone is selling our generation the idea that passive income can happen quickly, they are either lying or we are the passive income. Overnight success is another one I had to let go of. The people who seem to explode suddenly almost always spent years doing the work quietly before anyone noticed. What looks like a sudden moment is almost always the visible surface of a very long underground process. So when I was 3 months into trying to build something and it felt like nothing was working, I wasn't behind. I was just early. And early is honestly the best place to be if I'm willing to stay. Here's what the real shift in my thinking actually looked like, and this is the thing I want to hold on to. I stopped asking what credential I could get and started asking what problem I could solve. I stopped asking what job I could apply for and started asking what value I could create and for who. I stopped measuring my progress by steps in a system designed to serve institutions and started measuring it by the skills I was actually building, the work I was shipping, the capability I was developing in the real world. The economy stopped paying for my degree the moment degrees became common. It started paying for my output. And the sooner I really let that in, not just intellectually, but genuinely, the faster my thinking started to change. Because here's the thing I keep landing on at the end of all of this. I was told that a degree was an investment in my future, but an investment is supposed to generate a return greater than its cost. When I'm paying $100,000 and spending 4 years for a piece of paper that might, maybe, land me a $45,000 a year starting salary, that's not an investment. That's a purchase. I bought membership into a social story. And the story is starting to crack at the edges for anyone in our generation who's willing to actually look at it directly. The world doesn't owe me certainty. No path does. But I owe myself the honesty to look at what I'm trading.
what it actually costs, and whether the return is real or whether I'm just following instructions written for a world that no longer exists. Because the degree I was told to chase, the one that was supposed to be the answer to everything, might actually be one of the worst financial traps my generation ever walked into with a smile on our faces.